I have to record this again because I totally didn't have the microphone. Today we're going to talk about 8 things that photographers tend to overlook in their pricing. Number 1 is pre-production. So pre-production is basically anything that happens before the shoot. So if a client comes to you, if they DM you or message you or call you and they're saying, hey, we're interested in hiring you for a shoot, what are your rates? That begins pre-production. So all the time that it takes for you to come up with a quote and talk about logistics and figure out how you're going to make the shoot come together is all pre-production. And I think a lot of photographers tend to overlook this, or they forget about it and say, well, I'm only going to charge for the time it takes for me to shoot the photos. No, pre-production is a huge part of making sure that shoot comes together well. So you need to be incorporating that into your fee. Next is your skill and expertise. So this is pretty obvious, but I think a lot of people tend to overlook this. They think, oh, well, I'm just going to show up and shoot for 2 hours, so I don't want to charge too much. No, you've spent way more than 2 hours honing your craft. How many years has it taken you to get to where you started and where you are now? All those sleepless nights of watching YouTube tutorials, crying yourself to sleep, not being happy with your work until you finally get to the point where you think you're halfway decent. Make sure that you are accounting for that into your fee. It's easy to forget how far we've come, but know that you have a valuable skill that clients want to pay for. Next is production. So production is basically the actual shoot itself. If you're being asked to play many roles, you need to account for that in your rate, especially if, for example, you are supposed to find the location or source the models, which I guess this is sort of on the pre-production side, but it's actually the production as well because you're on set taking care of all those things in addition to shooting. Production is obviously a crucial part of the shoot itself, so make sure that you're incorporating that into your rate. Next is mileage. So a lot of photographers will kind of ignore mileage, but if you have to travel a long way to get to the shoot and you have to pay for parking and all these things, those are things that you should incorporate into your rate as well. Make sure you know where the shoot's going to be, how far you're going to have to drive. Don't forget, this is wear and tear on your car, and you have to pay for your car. These are costs that are being incurred because of the business transaction. So don't ignore the mileage that's required for the shoot that you're going to do. Okay, next is post-production. So for me, I want to say I spend anywhere from 2 to 3 times the amount in post-production as I do with the actual shoot. So if the shoot takes 2 hours, I'll spend anywhere between 4 to 6 hours in post-production, at least. In other words, post-production takes a long time. For me to import the images, edit them, color grade, retouch, upload, all those things, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. Way more than the shoot itself. Too many photographers will say, well, I charged the client $500 and it only took 2 hours, so I made $250 an hour. No, you didn't. You are making way less than you think you are if you incorporate all of the time that it took between pre-production, the shoot itself, and post-production and delivery. Next is file delivery, and I kind of touched on this in the last point. File delivery costs money. Yes, you can drop all of your images into Dropbox or Google Drive or WeTransfer, but there are some limitations to this. One, those services usually limit you as far as how many gigabytes that you're able to transfer. And 2, it doesn't really look that great. I use a service called Pixieset, and Pixieset creates beautiful galleries. I'm not getting paid for this, by the way. They create beautiful galleries so that when you just drag and drop all of your images, no matter how many different sizes there are, they arrange them in a way that makes them look really nice. And not only that, you're able to password protect the galleries if you need to. You can offer different resolutions to your clients with a click of a button. They can order prints right away. There's a lot of different features. Pixieset costs, for me, I think like $20 a month. So it does cost money. And because of this, you should be incorporating the cost of file delivery services and passing that on to your client, or at least taking that into consideration when you're pricing yourself. Next is Archival. So when it comes to backing up all of your images, everyone should have a service. I use Backblaze, but there's a ton out there. And it's so important to back up all of your information just in case you need it. If a client comes to you and they need something that you've taken a long time ago and you don't have it on your hard drive because your hard drive failed, you have a backup service to rely on. That backup service, of course, costs money, and it doesn't have to be super expensive, but it's something that you should take into consideration as well I think it's super easy to forget that we have all these tools at our disposal, often paid, and we are not incorporating that or building that into our rate. Lastly, I want to talk about licensing. So depending on the kind of shoot that you're doing, if it's a commercial shoot in which your client stands to profit from your images, you should be incorporating your licensing terms into your rate. And generally how it works with commercial shoots is you have your day rate or your photography rate, which is separate from your licensing rate. That is not the only way to do it, but that's one very popular way of doing it. If you want to build your rate into a bundle, you can also do that. But either way, you want to make sure that you're incorporating licensing. When you license your images, you're essentially giving your clients permission to use them in a way that's not just for personal use. If they are going to use your image for a huge billboard in Times Square, or they want to run it on TV, then you should be getting paid a fair amount because they're standing to profit from your images, from your work. I hope to make some more videos on licensing in the future, but for now, make sure that you are thinking about licensing and how your images are being used. And this is always something that you want to approach the client and ask about before the shoot begins. This is not something that you should decide on after the fact. It's always best to have a clear line of communication and figure out how are these images going to be used, where are they going to be used, and how long. So all of these things that I mentioned in this video are really a part of knowing your cost of doing business. And this is something that you've probably seen a lot on my blog, on my Instagram stories. It's a very important concept. But essentially, anything that requires your own capital or your time should be accounted for in your pricing. It shouldn't just be something that you make up. You need to formulate a solid plan or a foundation for why you charge what you charge. It's so important to know your business costs so you know how much you have to charge so that you can profit. Because after all, profit is the key to running a thriving business. Lastly, I want to say, don't position yourself as a commodity. If you want to make a good living with photography, you have to know your worth. Don't charge just a low hourly rate to your clients. You're offering so much more than that to them. What you do has value. I hope you guys found that helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.